Record. Okay. So Stacy, boy, I just really wanted to catch this on the fly, and I'm looking at the birds over your shoulder and thinking maybe that's why I'm thinking about catching things on the fly. We've been talking a little bit about the virtues and drawbacks of the world of things in motion. And Stacy's work has quite a bit to do with the idea of place, placelessness, anachronism, and a whole host of questions about where one is in the world. One of the things I found fascinating in looking at Stacy's experiences leading up to date was that she was an undergrad at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Now, this may not seem unusual if you're from Minnesota, but if you were born into the family Stacy was born into in New York, I'm still trying to figure out how you managed to get to Madison. But you might say just a little bit about your family and the situation in which you grew up.
That's interesting. Yeah, I am a first generation Iranian Jew, and my parents immigrated from Iran in 1968. It was during the Vietnam War, and the way I ended up at Wisconsin, which actually is funny because I don't know if many people would know this, but Iranian culture is very conservative. So women do not leave the home until they get married. So it was quite a big deal for me to go away to university, which is funny for you to even mention. I haven't thought about this in so long. But one of my brothers went to Wisconsin. My eldest brother went to Michigan, and my middle brother went to Wisconsin. So when it came time for me going to college, they couldn't keep me at home. And that's
You,
how I ended up there.
you've been out to visit them and thought the Midwest was okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was really young. My brothers are much older than me, but they kind of pushed me, especially my middle brother Adam, he who went to Wisconsin, and I knew all of his friends. They had all come to New York to live in New York after college, so I guess they influenced my decision.
Well, Stacy, I had thought before about the transition from Wisconsin to Australia, and I thought, oh well, we'll just figure out a way to make that connection because Australia is where your first major, or where the first book comes from. I wouldn't call it your first major project necessarily, but as we were speaking a little bit earlier today, we realized that the Midwest and Australia have this thing in common, and it's the title of your book, Tall Poppy Syndrome. Remember, we were saying, oh, the Midwest has its own version, and you should probably you're the person who can probably explain Tall Poppy Syndrome better than anybody, because you've lived it, you've been there, you've seen it. I mean, I guess I could say that I've experienced it firsthand in the Minnesota version, but maybe you can talk a little bit about how that collaborative project evolved and how you ended up landing in Australia to begin with. I mean, this is your story of migration, quite extensive.
There's so many parts to that question. I ended up in Australia because I married an Australian man. So I never meant to leave New York. I never thought that I would leave New York. And I ended up living in Sydney, moving to Sydney in 2008. And I first kind of heard of the term when I was trying to get work and trying to meet magazine editors in Australia, and people would say to me, "Oh no, you can't. You can't show yourself to be too proud. You have to be very kind of quiet and edge closer, slowly to editors. You can't just email them out of the blue."
Really?
And
How did they
yeah,
get new talent?
I don't think they do very often. But this is a long time ago. This is 2008, so things have changed. This is pre-Instagram. And so then I was kind of schooled on the term of tall poppy syndrome, which it comes from the British immigrants that the the way that Australia was populated was that England sent all the criminals to Australia. Not populated, but populated by the white man, I should say. Um, and it was a utilitarian ideal that came from one of the men who immigrated from England to Australia. And the thinking is that nobody should be too showy. And if anyone shows themselves too tall, like a tall poppy would, that society should chop them down and make them feel more average. And so the idea for the book, let me just start showing
Yeah,
the
let's look into those pictures and see how you articulated that notion.
um, so I think we give a little brief description in here. Um, but basically, I did this project with another American photographer named Amy Stein. And the two of us were interested in looking at doing a road trip through Australia. So that's a really important part of the project. We traveled through 250 kilometers through New South Wales. And we were interested in this idea of the American going, like coming through and journeying in another country and having a close look at another country. So here, let me see if I can pause it. This was our description and explanation for why we did the work. As Americans, we are taught to strive for success and celebrate those who distinguish themselves from the crowd. Tall poppy syndrome runs contrary to everything we know. From the moment we first heard this term, we were compelled to investigate it further. In March 2010, we embarked on a month-long road trip around New South Wales, Australia's most populous state. We set out to meet everyday Australians and explore their reaction to this cultural phenomenon. Our journey is recounted in these photographs.
Now, you and Amy knew each other through a color darkroom, right?
Yes, so we met at the ICP in the color darkroom at ICP.
Right.
And so the one of the ideas of the project is that we don't tell you who made any of the images. So in a way, we make ourselves kind of one and the same, which is an idea of behind tall poppy syndrome, is that everyone is the same. Nobody is better than anyone else. And we worked in three different ways. One is we would set up a camera, and one of us would be dealing with the subject and helping set up the shot with posing the subjects, and the other one would be setting up the composition with the camera.
Right.
Another way that we worked was we worked side by side. So there's an image coming up of rugby players, and we were literally, our cameras were side by side, making kind of the same picture at the same moment.
We have to remember that picture right there when we look at the video.
Yes, the tree. And another way that we worked is that we went into a location. Here are the rugby players. We went into a location and we separated, and we didn't see each other, and we would photograph what we found and then come back to meet each other.
This was just awesome.
In this case, thank you. Oh, just going back. Actually, in both of these, we set up the camera, and here, I guess we both spoke with the students. This place was amazing. It's in a town called Weetholly, and there's at the time. Again, this is 2010. There were 280 people in the town. And this was a one-room schoolhouse. And these are the children that had model releases, that had media releases, that the school already knew they were allowed to be photographed. And the way that we met them was really interesting, is that we actually ended up in Weetholly to photograph a man named Mon McKellar, and the book is dedicated to him at the end. None of the pictures of him came out, but we wanted to photograph him because he was given an award, a hero award. It's called the Australia Day Award. For going in. He saved a man from a burning oil tanker outside his home on the main road. So we went to photograph him, and then as we were photographing him and talking to him, we had lunch with him and his son. We said, "Oh yeah, we really want to photograph school children in uniform." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm the groundskeeper of the school. Why don't you come and I'll bring you over? And two of the children there are my granddaughters." So this image was made in 2010, and so you can imagine that these children are much older now.
Yeah, they all look like they're striving very hard not to stand.
And these are the Royal Flying Doctors. So we contacted different groups, this is from the Country Women's Association. We wanted to look at the individual and the group, because the way that we kind of understood tall poppy syndrome is this tension between individualism and group dynamics. These are the gatefolds that come
Right.
out in the book, and I have the book next to me. I can show it after. And we had conceptualized the gatefolds when we photographed
Well,
both those trees and the
mhm.
miners.
I was thinking, and the rugby players to a certain extent too, right?
And the rugby players, yeah.
No, and one of the things that struck me as we talked about tall poppy syndrome was that it was always bound to be a book. That
Hmm.
when you and Amy were talking about it, it was always going to be a book, right?
That's correct. The first time that I hung out with Amy at the Half King, it doesn't exist anymore, but it was quite a nice place in Chelsea. Um, and it was the first year I lived in Australia, and I was telling her about tall poppy syndrome and how I can't get an appointment with anyone and I can't get any work and I don't know what to do. Um, and she said, "Tall poppy syndrome, that's a great idea. That's a great title for a book." And that's really how all of this started. Um, and she was able to come to Australia. She had two exhibitions, one in Sydney and one in Perth, that paid for her to come out. Um, and yeah, so that's that's how that started out. I wanted to share a video of
Oh,
us.
yeah.
Oh, let me just make sure that you can hear me. Hang on one second. I have to stop my share. Okay. So this gives you an example of how we were working together.
Okay, here we are. We're trying to photograph this, and we're out here. And where are we? We're past Silverton. Hello. And look out, look up, Stacy. Hi. Let me see your hat. And there's our image. Oh my God. It's there somewhere. And we're setting up the camera. Oh my God, and the bugs are all over us. So we're being spastic. The mosquitoes are everywhere. Okay, so here's the image, beautiful. So we're past Silverton. This is where Mad Max was filmed.
So there was a bit of chaos, it looks like,
Yeah, they're coming in.
as we're working
They're
together.
ridiculous. They're swarming all around me.
This was
Okay.
this was towards the middle of the trip. Um, it's quite interesting. I was 7.5 months pregnant when we did the road trip, and so we had hired an assistant to come and help with the driving because Amy didn't drive on the other side of the road, and also just to be able to like drop us off in different locations and kind of help support us. And she left 3 days into the trip. She couldn't she couldn't take it. So we
What,
had to
what,
do
what couldn't she take?
we were working really hard, early in the morning, late at night, and it's two very strong personalities. And we realized after she left that we probably were talking through her as opposed to with each other. And it
Oh,
was actually a blessing in disguise that she left because it made us really, it forced us to only be together and to be working really much more collaboratively.
hmm
Um,
hmm.
so
Is that when you made some of those decisions about hiding authorship, or
No, I
what was
think
the?
I think that was always part of it, was to hide the authorship. We knew that we had stylistically we photographed very similarly.
Mhm.
And we both had road trip as part of our kind of
modus operandi.
thank you, that's the word, those were the words I was looking for.
The MO.
And we photographed with similar camera types, similar film, so we had ways of working already that were parallel.
Right. So
Yeah.
so the new book, just released by Ghost. I keep wanting to say Ghost.
Yeah, a lot of people say that.
Ghost feels a little bit right to me when I look at this book, the inside at least. But Ghost, just fresh off the presses almost, couple months. Anyway, the new book, The Moon Belongs to Everyone, is surprisingly autobiographical. I mean, I don't think you necessarily did it that way, but I think that there's a lot of strands in this book that reflect on your story and on contemporary motion between places, and the sense of uprootedness or disconnectedness, or and also the failings of the words like immigration.
Yes.
Anyway, one of the things that you did in this book that I really love and that really sets the stage for understanding the book, and it's something that I didn't read until much later, and developed a very different appreciation for the book once I did, but there's a prose poem that you wrote
Yes.
that appears at the very, very end of the book. So we're going to do something radical, and Stacy's going to read the prose poem before we start looking at a run through
Okay.
of the book.
Okay, I will do that. George, I'm getting messages that people aren't able to connect. Are you getting
Really?
any? Yeah, just before I continue. Maybe it's too late to include them now anyway.
I had been looking to see.
Do you have any emails, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I haven't been getting any emails, although it's hard for me to notice while I'm doing this. So I'll share the screen. I don't know. I think can you just send them the link again?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that right now.
Yeah, I don't see any people in the waiting room or.
I think there was a disconnect. Sorry, everybody. Make sure that everyone feels included. I don't want them to feel. And then I'm gonna start reading this poem. Okay. I have a video flip through of the book, so I'm gonna play that while I speak over it.
Okay.
Immigrant who? You, me, they, us? Weren't those our stories, our grandparents? Weren't those, let me start over, sorry. Immigrant who? You, me, they, us? Weren't those stories our grandparents? My parents did it too, somehow different, borders more disparate, almost like time travel to shift place to place. Assimilation never spoke of the earth, but one must seep into it nonetheless. Me, they, us, we all see I. Once you arrive, are you them? Do they become us? Amorphous, impalpable identities, being, belonging, she, he, me, ours, yours, mine. Even though we, they, me, he, she, our collective pasts differ, the webs we extend onto dirt, dirt that came here from somewhere too. Standing here now can hardly feel there anymore. Climbing in search of anchors. Here, there, was, is thousands of layers between land and sky. Warm yellow sun radiates as before the hour moonlight envelops sleeping forms. Eyes sting, blinking, coasting in limbo. Like an ocean wave comes from there but never really ends anyplace. Crashing and relinquishing its position. Change made sense in the beginning. Once you migrate your eyes, you see differently. Emigrate and smells seem stranger, but the juice of a golden orange can be sweet and sour wherever the season. Lime green appears wholesome. In distance, memories transform, become odd and unfamiliar, the place between here and there.
Mm. I'd almost like to hear you read that again, but I mean, there's so much wonderful imprecision in that, in the writing. The fact that there are so many attempts at putting pronouns on things, so much sort of anachronism, so many different ways that we're not settling into place, that I catch as I listen to you read that.
It was the first time I've ever written any poetry, so I appreciate you picking up on it.
Um, can we flip back to the images of the faces
Yeah.
just for a second? Well, there's all I want to talk about the color too, but I just wanted to pause on the faces, the portraits.
I think it's coming up here. Why isn't it playing? Ah, stuck.
Because one of the things that is so beautiful about the portraits is reflected in the construction of the book itself as an object. You may notice as Stacy turns these pages that there's a shimmer to them. There's a luminescence that has to do with the production of the book, and it's silvery ink on black paper stock in at least this section of the book. The color images are on a more conventional stock. But the very first time I opened up this book and looked at this image and seeing how it caught the light, I knew that this was a book that was standing out to me. I mean, it immediately jumped up and grabbed my attention. And then that notion of the moon belonging to everyone was hard for me to gather at first, but I think once I saw the glow, the moonlight, the silvery moon in these pictures, I was enthralled. It still took me a while to get to the notion of migration, and it took a little bit of personalizing and seeing things like in this image that are almost camouflaged, things that are trying to find their place. So I was sorting through the work and whap. You could pause on that for a second, Stacy, if you can. There are these chromatic sledgehammers that I like to refer to them as. And in the flip through before, you may have noticed that there are maybe 4 or 5 of them. They're sort of like they're like a phase of the book. They guide a section of color imagery, and when you look at these pages, it's not just plain color. I mean, these are images of something, and I don't know. Should I reveal the secret, Stacy?
You can, yeah.
These are actually close-ups, extreme close-ups of their Australian flowers, right?
They are all of them except for the yellow, which is funny that we're talking about it on the yellow. They're the first images that I started to make, where I was walking around the streets of Sydney making banal documentary images, very sort of similar to Tall Poppy Syndrome stylistically. And I started to get really curious about color because the color of flowers in Australia is so different than the color of flowers that I was used to seeing. And I was really interested in the idea of color as a marker of memory or as a trigger of memory. And so I wanted to see what happened if I took my Hasselblad lens and put it directly into the center of the petal. And then also being aware that color in photography is so subjective, and there's so many different elements that bring the color, make the final color what it is.
Yeah.
And then when I moved back to New York, I was trying to think of what colors here are emblematic. And so the yellow is from a yellow school bus. So this is a close-up of a yellow school bus.
Oh, wait, so this isn't a flower.
No, this is the only one in the book that's not a flower.
Well, I know that that children play a huge role in your life. I mean, and not just the idea of being a parent, but how children affect your ability to be mobile. You know, and how they've changed your existence as they change so many other people's.
As I say, don't they change most people's existence?
Yeah, they do. But they certainly do put a weight on us, an obligation not to roam as we might have once wanted to.
I'll keep
Okay,
playing the video.
yeah, let's keep going. Now, one of the other things that I was intrigued. Oh, here's a portrait. Yeah. And you can even see, looking at these two pages right now, how the light cast is different on the curved page and the flatter page. And I saw these images and I started to think that they reminded me of phases of the moon. You know, how a light was passing over someone's face. These are images that you made. Tell me about the setup for these images.
Well, I've there all the people. I'll let it flip through a little bit. All the people are friends or friends of friends. They're all immigrants who were living in Sydney at the time. I I found a very specific. Oh no, I was hoping that it would just click through. Location with a very specific type of light. And at a very specific, where the sun was at a very specific angle, I should say, um, and tried to photograph them uniformly because I wasn't interested in them as individuals, but more in terms of a representation um, of an everyone, so to speak, of a collective of individuals who were experiencing life in a similar way. Um, did you want me to talk about how I made the images, or?
Yeah, well, how they fit into this notion of the moon, and how the moon kind of guided you in making this book.
Um, well, I think, for me, the moon belongs to everyone is to say that, we all experience, we all have a relationship to the moon, the sun, the wind, that is not specific to our culture or where we come from. But at the same time, when we immigrate, we lose a connection to the landscape. Um,
Pause
and
on
so
that.
I don't know how to answer the question. I guess I was looking I realized when I was living in Sydney that being an immigrant, um, I forget how I said it to you earlier today. I had it such a,
It was so brilliant. It was so brilliant.
it was so
I
brilliant the
mean,
first time I
one
spoke
of the
about
things
it.
that I note is that you really have tried to bring the moon down to the earth. There's a sense of the paper plate, for instance, at sort of a half moon stage, and the orange rinds, the bitter orange rinds as little fragments of the moon. So there's this humanizing of the moon, and I think that the light, that the ink that you use on the pages of the book has that quality of something really tangible.
Yeah, I guess thinking about the portraits, I was interested in photographing a collective or in making a representation of a collective. And I was interested in the idea of the term immigrant and what does it mean to be from one place and end up somewhere else. And I realized through this process that all these people that I was photographing, we all felt very similar to one another, almost as if we were a culture in and of ourselves, that we lived in this limbo space. Um, in a non-existent location, so to speak, and we no longer felt tied to the land that we came from, and we weren't exactly connected to the land that we were living in. And when I moved back to New York, I found that I was still photographing those themes. And I moved back to New York in 2016. It was during the height of the election season, and the word immigrant was a really charged word. And I was, in making the book, I was interested in pushing this idea that, who are immigrants? We're all immigrants in a way. Anyone who's moved home, moved from one state to another, you don't have to live in another country. You can feel this sensibility of no longer being tied to your land. And so I guess those were kind of the themes that I hope come across.
In that image a couple of pages ago, I don't know if you're able to scroll back easily, or if that causes confusion. Yeah. Oh,
this one?
No, the woman in the previous.
The woman, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's an impression that we get in looking at this and other portraits that one page is darker than the other, but that's not at all the case. What we're watching is the effect of light on that beautiful inky surface.
Yes, that's correct.
And these are all shot in a way that reminds me a little bit of the cinematographer's tool of shooting day for night.
That was very intentional. I was shooting day for night, and because I wanted to take the specificity of land out of the photograph. So photographs are documents, right? They are of something, but I wanted to see how I could remove the specificity, remove your ability to kind of say, oh, I know where that is, or I know what that is, because for me, this is very much a sensation of feeling in limbo, or I don't want to say lost, although a lot of people do say that they feel there's a sense of loss in the work. But yeah, day for night was something that I was doing consciously.
I keep thinking of phrases from the prose poem also. That one about standing here now can hardly feel there anymore. It really rings to me when I look at the portraits.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another thing for day for night that is kind of, it's maybe just for me, but when I was living, in Australia and New York are on completely different sides of the planet and completely different time zones. So, and in the poem, I say, the hour moonlight envelops. So it starts with, here, there, was, is, thousands of layers between land and sky. Warm yellow sun radiates as before the hour moonlight envelops sleeping forms. And I was thinking about when I was going to sleep in Sydney, my family was waking up in New York, and now vice versa. When we go to sleep here in New York, our family in Sydney is waking up.
I mean, and you're married to a man from South Africa, right?
Yes, he's originally South African, but he moved to Sydney when he was 10.
Right. I mean, so there's all kinds of strains and strands in your life coming from all over the place.
Yes.
Not surprising that the pronouns get all mixed up and
That's right.
Rare. I think we're coming to the last color passage in the book, which
I don't know why it gets stuck when it pauses for so long. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Yeah. Now something happened here which I found very delightful. When I got to this page, I don't know if we can see it in the way you shot the video, but I looked at the poem. The prose poem is on that page, and my initial impression was that Stacy had done it with orange reflective ink. And I thought, oh, that's really beautiful, because all of that orange at the end of the book just sort of washes through to the end and out onto the text. But you were quick to point out that no, that's just the photograph reflecting in the orange ink. I mean, in the silvery ink. But it was a beautiful illusion, and I think that's pretty consistent with a lot of the things that happen in the book. There's an illusion of presence and place. We may have some people who want to ask questions. But no, we were going to look at a couple more pictures, weren't we, Stacy?
Oh, okay. Which ones would you like me to?
There was the one of your test, your beta test for the portraits.
Okay, I'll bring that one up first. Yeah, here we go. That's the one you're talking
Right.
about.
Yeah.
I think you wanted me to explain how this image, what this image represents. So this is one of the first images that I made. It was in 2014, and I was in an area called Mildura, which is sort of in the middle of, it's on the border between New South Wales and Victoria. Victoria is the state that Melbourne's in, and New South Wales is the state that Sydney's in. And it's in the, it's probably about it's in the middle of the country. We had to take two planes, a big plane and a small plane, to get there. It's a regional area, and I was there to give a talk about tall poppy syndrome. And my son was with me. He's 6 months old, and I was breastfeeding him, so he had to come with me on the trip. And I wanted to make a self-portrait. I was with a friend who was driving me around and showing me the area, and this was a dried up lake bed. And I wanted to make a self-portrait here, and so I laid a blanket down and had my son sitting next to me, and I was singing to him ABCs and turning my head side to side. And I had the camera set up in front of me on a high angle. And um, I brought this image home and realized that this would be an interesting way to photograph the portraits, to be able to photograph people in an in-between space and in a nondescript landscape. And so
Well,
this became sort of the, as you said, beta image.
and the singing may not have been intentional, but it was perfect, right?
Yeah, it worked out really well. And then actually what I did was when I photographed the portraits, we were in conversation throughout the whole time, and I asked each individual person to bring a song that reminded them of home or that had some sort of emotional memory for them. And so after we would do the whole shoot, photographing, talking, I had them sing a song. And so many of the portraits actually ended up from that moment of the shoot.
Right. Just before we go to questions, I wanted to differentiate The Moon Belongs to Everyone from Tall Poppy Syndrome, in that the project never wanted explicitly or exclusively to be a book. I mean, the book is one of its many lives, right?
Yes, I always imagined the project to be many iterations. I wanted to play um, with the way that we understand an artwork also, and also felt that uh, because it was about migration and about the changes that come with migration, that never being static or in one place, it would be interesting to make the artwork as different iterations. So it started out as an 8-channel video installation. I have some installation shots here. This is the first time that I showed it, which was on, it was at part of my MFA, and it was in a gallery that had a gantry, so they were able to suspend TV screens. I was the first one to get them to do that. We suspended 8 TV screens from the gantry, and there was a surround sound in the space, and you could actually walk in and amongst the screens. And also, I should mention that the videos are they are unsynced, so you never had the same relationship between any of the screens as you walked through it. And for something I didn't talk about actually with the book is that the sequence and editing is such an important part of the book. I wanted the viewer to feel like they were coming in and out of spaces, and color was a way that I could pull threads from one section, throughout one section, I should say. And with the video work, montage was how I wanted to play. So the images you can see in this one, they pull from one to the other in a very long transition, so that they, sorry?
Oh, it dissolves. I was thinking of sort of extended lap dissolves, right?
Yeah, kind of like that. And so playing with the montage, and then also with the book playing with montage. So something I
Okay.
haven't mentioned. Yeah.
So let's flip back to real-time screen, and I'll unmute people. And actually, can you unmute yourselves? If you want to ask a question, feel free. Joel, you look like you might have a question, Joel.
Well, actually not. I'm still processing things. So I'll give one impression of my how you deal with a sense of place in The Moon Belongs to Everyone is that it's the very fine texture of the dirt of any substance that it seems you're dealing with as a way of trying to build a sense of place.
The texture?
Rather than taking large bites, rather than looking at identifiable spaces.
Yeah, I
I don't
appreciate
have more
that.
to say about that, just an observation.
I appreciate that. That's true. And like I said earlier, trying to take away the specificity of things and trying to understand how things feel, right? And
Mhm.
how place feels was something that I was really
And yet you
interested
are
in.
dealing with something specific. I mean, it wouldn't feel different from where you were before if it weren't specific to the place you're in now. So,
I think it's fascinating, Stacy, that the yellow was the school bus in New York. I'm kind of stuck on how that little chromatic incident plays out in with all the other chromatic spectrum. Why New York
Is it
would
a
be?
nice surprise?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
I have a question.
Yeah.
yeah.
Hi.
Two, so Iran has this wonderful film history, and was that an influence of yours? And then I happened to be on a Zoom artist talk a couple weeks ago of an Iranian painter, and she was talking a lot about how poetry in Iranian society is very central, more so than maybe other cultures. So was that a part of why you chose to have poetry involved with the book? Could it have been any other way?
I really appreciate that. Thank you. I would say I would say film in general is very much an influence for me. Persian film, maybe not so much, specifically Iranian film. But poetry, yes. Farsi is a very poetic, metaphoric language. And when I was growing up, my parents would have these huge parties and they would sing poetry to each other. They don't do it anymore, unfortunately, but they would recite poetry. They would be playing music and someone would be singing a poem. Very much a part of the culture. So I would say, I probably was very much influenced by language, the Persian language, and metaphor within the language. It's quite a lot of the words that I like to use as examples are kind of curse words, so I probably won't say it here, but the way that they say
Oh, go
things is
ahead.
not one of my favorite things one of my favorite terms is hak tu saret konam, which means I throw dirt on your head, which is one of the worst things that you could say to someone because it literally means I'm going to kill you, I'm going to bury you. But rather than saying I'm going to kill you, they're saying, I'm throwing dirt on you. So kind of playing with that. That's one thing. And your father is a dog is another term that's a really
Mhm.
mean thing to say to someone. Um, anyway,
Were
so
you,
yeah.
Peter, were you familiar with Iranian film that stuck out to you?
Nothing in particular. I just know there's that history, a strong film history, and then I just happened to be in on this artist talk of an Iranian painter. So
Interesting. Yeah, the Persian culture for me is something, as a first generation, I think it was really a big influence because I grew up in a very American town and I went to university in a very American town where nobody ever heard of Persians. And then being a Persian Jew also on top of that is another kind of nuance to that culture. But the home was always somewhere where I knew I was Iranian, was inside my parents' home. Outside of that was very confusing, very much a dichotomy growing up, everything complete opposites culturally. So
Mhm.
probably all of that still is very much an influence in making work.
Stacy, your story is so fascinating and all sorts of interwoven pieces, and I love what you told me earlier today about where you and your husband met.
Yes, we met in Vegas. I used to travel a lot,
Yeah,
not so much anymore.
to meet in Vegas, and you decided not to get married in Vegas, right?
That's right. We decided to get married in New York so that we wouldn't make everyone immigrate.
Yeah, that would have been a little crazy. Hey, Meg, it looks like you're unmuted.
Question. Oh, yeah, I have a question. Stacy, your work is, I mean, just wonderful. And I feel like I need more time to look at everything more and hear the poem again. But
Thank
I
you.
was really interested in the way that in the collaborative book, it seems like you sort of had a sense of the design going in, like you said, the gatefolds even, you had a sense of that already. But in the moon, you had to design the book. You'd already had the projections, that iteration. And can you talk about that process of designing the book and whether that came easily or how, what that was like for you?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Tall poppy syndrome, Amy and I knew very early on, I guess for both of the books. One thing that I think is really important is that for me, a photo book is the object, it is the artwork. So for me, this is very much as the video work is the artwork, this is also the artwork. It's not about the individual images, it's about how it all plays together, how the work feels and functions. So the design in both books are very much geared towards that rather than being a selection of successful images. They are the story, right? For lack of a better word, I hate the word story when we're talking about photography, but they are the story. And so Amy and I knew that we wanted to make those gatefolds. And so when we were designing the book, the publisher gave us the layout because the way that the signatures are and the way that the pages fold, the gatefolds had to be in a very specific location. So when we designed and edited and sequenced that work, we knew how many images had to come before the gatefold, how many images had to be between the two gatefolds, and it was very specific. With The Moon Belongs to Everyone, it had many iterations. And so I started photographing in 2014 and the book was meant to come out in 2020. So I already had everything was done in 2020. I was supposed to be in Italy on March 1st. Obviously that didn't happen. With The Moon Belongs to Everyone, so my first artist book, which I'm sorry I don't have a copy to show you, I did a lot of bookmaking workshops, literally making accordion books and playing with different kinds of styles. And that book is a full accordion book that I made up where all the different pages pull out. So you could open it up as an object and it kind of looks like a pinwheel. You can open up all the pages together. Sorry, it's really horrible to talk about something and not be able to show you.
Yeah.
And when sorry.
I'm just thinking we're cursed as photographers and visual people. We need the thing to see.
Yes. Well, it helps to describe. It helps to make sense of what I'm saying. And then when I came back to New York, I realized that if I was going to make it a book, I wanted it to be a book that people could hold, and it would be, again, the story. We need to come up with a better word than that. And I made several different maquettes, and I knew very much from the beginning that I wanted the book to be something that was easy to hold, that it wouldn't be overbearing, that you would go deep I wanted the viewer to go into the story and not feel like they could come out of it. So that's why all the images are full bleed and there's no borders. I
Mhm.
wanted you to feel enveloped by this universe that I created. So that was very much intentional. Again, the book is the art object, it is the piece in and of itself. And then I was really lucky to work with Stuart Smith of Gost. He is the head designer, the publisher. He is Gost. And so I went to him with a maquette, and he was able to take all of the things that I wanted and make it sing, with his expertise.
Did you
So the
know
silver,
early on that you wanted to do the printing on black?
yeah. So the way I met Gost was I went to APAD, which is an art fair here in New York. It usually runs in April. Who knows when it's going to run again? And it was the first year I moved back, and I went to APAD, and I was checking out all the publishers there, and they had a book. I have it on my bookshelf called Nowhere Far by Nicholas Hughes, the British photographer. Um, and that book is stunning. It's a lot. It's all different kinds of papers, but two sections are with navy blue paper, and then gold ink, and then silver ink, and then there's color as well. Excuse me. And I fell in love with that book, and I kind of started a banter, a funny joke, ongoing joke with Katie Clifford, who was working at APAD, and we became really good friends. And so from seeing Nicholas Hughes' work, I knew that Gost would be able to produce the kind of book that I wanted to produce, and also knew that they knew how to play with different ways of printing photographs into a book.
Mhm.
And so silver ink always made sense because of the moon. We think of it as silver or gray. Yeah. But the black paper wasn't, that came after, and probably with Stu's
Took a bit of testing to get there.
Yeah, you can't really test because there's no money for testing. So you can't really test, but until it's too late, really. Like I
Mhm.
got some tests of the black and whites, but envisioning what would be the best. And so black with silver was what we came up with.
Well, that's why the color spreads are so startling also, because they just jump out at you. They wipe the black away.
Yeah.
Jenny, Kim, were you gonna, I thought you might have been interested in.
Yeah, kind of going off the previous question, I was just wondering, because with the first project, I was like, oh, there was like a timeline, a time frame of, it was going to be a book. I felt like a lot of stuff was already kind of answered, or there was some guidelines. But for the Wound project, I feel like you could just like keep shooting forever, because there's like so many, there's just so many different elements and types of like, color versus the way things look. And I was just curious about like how you get to a point where you're like, this is like completed for a book form or an exhibition, or
It's a great question. When I finished the second video iteration of Moon Belongs to Everyone, actually probably the first one, when I finished my MFA, my supervisor, so in Sydney, your MFA is a research degree. So you work with one supervisor, and you work for 2 years, and you write a thesis, and you kind of like what a PhD would be here, but not like that, but the way that PhD functions. And she said to me, okay, Stacy, you're done with this project. You are not allowed to do any more. You've done everything you can. You need to move on. I remember specifically sitting with her outside the showing of the video when the reviewers were inside looking at the work. And I was like, okay. I don't know why she said that to me or what it was all about. And then the Australian Centre of Photography picked up the work and showed it as a different iteration several months later. And I thought it was done. I really did. And I thought moving to New York meant it was done, because I'm moving back home. So, of course, I understood the landscape that I grew up in and lived in, prior to the 9 years that I was in Australia. And when I moved back, I didn't think that I was photographing for the project, but through time realized that I was still asking the same questions. And so I think that is the most important way to know whether or not you finished a project is, are you still asking the same questions? Are those questions, like the way that I photograph is I'm photographing through questions, right? Things that I'm thinking about, I'm stressed is not the right word. I'm worried about, I don't understand, I'm trying to make sense of. And so if I'm still inspired by those questions, then I am not finished with the project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's such a succinct answer to that question that everyone's always trying to figure out the answer to.
Well, I do a lot of teaching and I do a lot of private mentoring, and a lot of people have asked me that question before. And so it has taken time to get to that, but I finally realized that it is when you are done asking the questions and you are no longer finding yourself picking up the camera to research something or to think about something.
Well, if people want to find your book, I'm assuming is Tall Poppy Syndrome still available? It may or may not be.
I saw it on, I think you could buy it on Target and on Amazon. I saw it somewhere for like $5. I sent it to Amy. I can't remember where, like a resale or something. I think it's so funny, but I think you can still buy it on Amazon. That $5 I haven't seen in a long time. The Moon Belongs to Everyone. You can buy at most major bookstores, and also I'm waiting to find them on art bookstores. So there have been a lot of delays with shipping, and so I know Photo Eye is supposed to have it, but I haven't seen it on their website yet.
They're waiting for a review, I think.
Maybe. But I've seen it on Barnes and Noble. I've seen it on Book Depository. I've seen it on Amazon, which is not where I want you to go to buy it. You can buy a signed copy through me. I have a personal website. I don't have many copies left.
But imagine the pen you must use to sign must be.
It's silver.
Yeah. Gorgeous. Well, I want to thank you so much, Stacy, for spending time with us. We didn't get to mention your middle name, by the way.
Yes, Arezou.
Which means?
Wish.
Wished.
Wish
in Farsi.
Yeah. My brothers are Arman, which means dream, and Omid, which means hope. I always joke with my parents, they're like the farthest thing from hippies, but I always joke with them, like from the names that they gave us, you would think that they were,
dreams, wishes, and hopes.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I'm going to put there's a link if you are interested in helping offset some of the costs. They are huge costs, but there are some costs involved in doing this. And if you're interested in Venmoing me a bit of $5, $10, that would be great. This is digital passing the hat, as it were. And we will continue with the series of Photobook Banters in July. On the 13th, we will see Tim Soder. And on August 17th, Sig Harvey and I will be having a discussion face-to-face, in person, in the great state of Maine.
Oh, wow, that's excellent.
So that'll be fun. But thank you again, Stacy.
Thank you,
anyone
George.
else have any last comments, suggestions? If not,
hello, I would like to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Linda Kagan. I'm Stacy's mother-in-law from Sydney.
Hello, Linda.
Hello, Stacy. I'm not going to be an artistic critic, but what I do want to say is how proud we are of Stacy in her achievement of this Moon Belongs to Everyone, because we lived it. And we have a balcony off our apartment that when the moon is full, it is the most perfect sight of the moon. And Stacy came numerous times. Oh, somebody's calling me. Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Stacy came numerous times at midnight, at 10 in the evening, to come and photograph the moon from our balcony. Do you remember, Stacy?
I do.
And also she did this project when she had 2 tiny children to look after, and a brave lady she is.
Yes.
And
Thank
we
you,
are so
Linda.
proud of her, and we miss you terribly.
We miss you too.
Linda, thank you for showing up early, by the way, Linda.
And it was a wonderful Zoom to listen to. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank
And
you.
especially to you, George. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Hope I didn't embarrass you, Stacy.
Never, Linda, never. Love you too.
Okay. Bye. All right,
Bye.
everyone. Look forward to seeing and hearing from you next month, and also in August. And we have programs coming forth through the fall as well. So again, Stacy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, George. And thank you everyone for joining.
All right, we'll sign off until next time. Bye,
Until
everyone.
next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Stace.
That's all.
The soul was here too.
So good to have family, isn't it?
Yes, all over the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are your kids speaking to you, Stacy, or are they?
No, those were my sister-in-law's children that are at her grandparents' house, at their grandparents' house, apparently. That's funny. Ooh, I wasn't expecting that.
Right at the end too, right when you needed it. Well, there will be a recording that will be available at some point in the not too distant future, I think. I don't know that people look at recordings, but they like to know that they're there, or no. And we will see, hopefully, some spontaneous generosity floats its way in here.
That's fine.
And I will, endeavor to help you with in whatever way I can.
That's fine. Thank you. You'll let me know how it goes. But there weren't that many
No.
people in the end.
There were about a dozen, 15 maybe. I'm sorry about the people who couldn't get in. Do you know what the situation was with them?
I had put the link for people to register to Photobook Banter. One person said that they never received any email from you on how to actually join.
Oh, I think I sent out an email to everyone who had registered, sending them the link. Maybe they registered after I did that.
I don't know. I don't think so, because the one person that said that to me had registered quite early.
Oh. Yeah, I have to, the registration thing, I have to get it out of the way because I don't understand quite enough how to make that work.
I think what has to happen is that when someone registers, they get an immediate email from you that with the Zoom link.
Okay, like an
So
auto.
it doesn't have, an auto reply. Exactly.
And
with
I
the
could do
Zoom
that
link.
using Google Forms.
Yes.
And then it auto replies with the link. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because you don't want people to get stuck. So I put that link because I wanted people to register for you so that you would have their details and you could share with them what else you were doing.
Right.
And I meant to switch it to the Zoom link today, but I forgot. So
thank you for that.
Yeah, I just wonder if you lost some people in there with the registration.
It's probably, yeah. I mean, I like the idea of registration, but I didn't know enough to make it happen the way it ought to have happened.
It's okay. You're learning.
I am.
Zoom has lots of tutorials. Like I'm constantly getting emails from them on how to do things. So maybe there's tutorials there that you can watch that can help you figure out what the best way going forward.
Yeah, because I mean, we've done so many of these over the last year, but still to do it from the producer side is a little nerve-wracking, I find.
Yeah. How did it work with La Luz?
They had staff. I mean, they have the director and a digital producer working on it. So I didn't have to do all of the little pieces.
Mhm. And are you going to do more with them, or is that finished now? What?
I don't know. I'm waiting to hear more from them if they want to continue doing the series. I think it went well, but I enjoyed myself. I hope others did too.
That's good. Well,
it
it
was-
sounded like a great lineup. I didn't hear of it until Eleanor sent me the email saying that you were interested in including me. So that's when I had a look. I didn't know about it
Right.
beforehand. I mean, I had heard of La Luz, but I didn't, I'm not like on their email blast.
We never got to the question of how a photo book experiences tall poppy syndrome.
Oh, right.
Oh well. Hour goes by pretty quickly.
It does. It does. Well, if you end up doing any more, talks with other organizations or whatever, I'm happy to I love talking. So
You did a great job.
thank you. It's a little bit tough sometimes to like figure out which direction to go in, but
Well, I ask these multi-pronged questions that are really kind of coming from, my attention being pulled in so many different ways at one time.
well, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, and it's nice to meet some new people. So that's always great.
It is. All right. Good enough,
And
Stacy.
thank you. Let me know when the photo eye review is coming out or what you know about it.
I will make all efforts to make that happen.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.